cheesewax. Get the facts, don't be lax. A flavor climax to the max. Smoked by the stack, so just relax with a little cheesewax.
6 months ago, I waxed some ordinary, inexpensive grocery store cheeses. I specifically selected very mild cheese flavors, some Gouda and some mild yellow cheddar cheese. I cold smoked these cheeses just like I usually do, 2 hours in apple and pecan smoke. Then I waxed them. What? What does that even mean? So after 6 months at between 48 to 62 degrees, how did they do? Are they edible? Do they taste good? Did they go bad? How do they look and smell? How is their texture? Did they just dry out? Well, let's find out. Smoke it!
Well, ladies and gentlemen, for our cheese wax, I got some what I consider to be lower quality cheese. This is just a store brand. I typically like to use higher end brands like Cabot and of course imported and local dairies if they make cheese. And this is just a basic Cracker Barrel Gouda. The reason I'm using these today is we're going to age them using cheese wax in an old traditional way that you can also do. If you do it right, you can make a delicious product. I will turn this mild cheddar into probably quite a bit stronger cheddar. Of course, we're going to smoke it first. We want to see how those smoke flavors develop in a cheese wax aging. So it'll be 6 months from now when I will break these out of their wax and we'll give them a taste and see how they did. Actual cheddar cheese is white. This has not been colored, so this has just got the normal color that it would have, and this would actually look probably more like that. But that's okay. We're gonna put these in brine and then out to the smoker. We'll put in our cheese wax cheese.
Once smoked, our experimental cheese was allowed to be vac packed and kept for 7 days to allow full smoke penetration, like I normally do with all of my cheeses. Here you see some commercially available cheese wax. Links below in the description if you're interested. And this type of wax is specially blended for waxing cheese, which means the wax allows the cheese to breathe, but disallows pathogens or fungi to get into the cheese other than what is already in the cheese, for example, blue cheese or something, based on its initial creation, of course. The wax comes in a variety of colors. I'm using red here. The process is really quite simple. Melt the wax to just a bit above its melting temperature, between 160 and 170 degrees, in a tall enough container where you can submerge at least half of your largest cheese piece you have, and that way you can handle the cheese from each end until it's fully coated. Now I'm using a double boiler, as you just saw, to make sure my wax doesn't burn. But again, if you can monitor your temperature, we really just don't want to overly heat up the cheese itself when we dip it. One trick I use here is to place the unwrapped and completely dry cheese in the refrigerator for an hour or so. This way it'll be cold and will cause the wax to adhere and solidify very quickly once you dip it in the wax. And as you can see here, it is really just a process of dipping, allowing the wax to solidify, dipping the other end, and just inspecting it to make sure all of the cheese is completely coated with wax. No spots allowed uncovered. See those little spots on that piece of Gouda there. So it's okay to dip it 2-3 times, as many times as you need to make sure it's completely coated. Look at that with those stickers and subliminal messages. You should actually do what they say. Aren't they pretty looking? The big question, of course, is how does it look, smell, and taste after they are aged? Because you have to admit, these would make great holiday or anytime gifts.
It's time for the moment you've been waiting for. Da, 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 da.
Okay, that's enough of that. Let's get to the cheese.
So the cheese that we waxed 6 months ago has been staying in a cool, dark area for that amount of time. So I went out and bought the same kind of cheese that we used to do this with. Now, as you'll recall, we smoked both of these and then cheese waxed them. What we want to find out is what's the texture difference between a fresh Gouda and a fresh mild cheddar compared to the mild cheddar and Gouda we started with. Is the smoke flavor still there? Is it different from what we would normally have for a smoke flavor? Alright, so we'll start by looking at the cheddar first. So I'm going to take off the Smokey Dave sticker. And isn't that pretty? I mean, think about it, you could make a gift out of that. But right now, we're concerned with how it looks, how it tastes, how it smells. I see the cheese is not pulled away from the sides. I have noticed that in some other videos I've watched where the cheese literally dries out. We've got a pretty thick coating of wax, so let's see if we can peel some of that off. It does peel away from the cheese pretty well. I'm going to give it the smell test. Oh, I can smell smoke on that. 6 months. If you were to leave a piece of cold smoked cheese like this, if it lasted for 6 months, the smoke would be almost gone from it. I've done that a few times. Now it is a lot oily, quite a bit of oil on that. Let's cut off ourselves a piece. Yeah. I'll give it a taste. It's definitely drier, very sharp, and very smoky. Let's compare it to the original cheese that we started with. As you can see, this mild cheddar has some of that orange coloring in it, but look at the difference. How bright that is compared to this aged cheese. That's really good. I want to see how that compares to just a piece of this mild. This is a lot more moist. Has an almost bouncy feel, if that makes sense. It's this is a little more crumbly. It's not really crumbly. It's not really the right terms, but it's definitely drier than this. The flavor here is very mild. This is like sharp cheddar now. So this turned into that. So here we got. Cut it down the middle. Okay. Now this one, you can actually see it better here. This one's pulled away a little bit from the sides. You really want to have it airtight. Now remember, we brined these. We brined this in order to make sure that there's no pathogens. And of course, it was smoked, which also is a preservative process. I'm going to cut myself off a piece of this. We'll compare it to the original. Take a look at that. Notice the color difference. This is a lot lighter yellow. This is turned orange through the aging process. Let's see how it tastes. Okay, that's really dried out compared to the original Gouda. Very, very strong. Very, almost cheddary. Good smoke. Real good smoke there. Compared to the regular Gouda, this is good. Certainly a little more sharp than regular mild cheddar. Has a nice, the Gouda flavor to it. A good creamy texture. This isn't as creamy. This is definitely sharper. A little harder. Delicious. But the wonderful thing about this is a awesome and very decorative way of setting up your cheese. Doesn't require refrigeration, just keep it in a cool area. 6 months, absolutely delicious. And this could go for a year, and I plan on keeping these two and aging them for a year, and then I'll do a recap at that point.
Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and I encourage you to give this a try. If you are at all crafty and like making gifts for others, or just love the prospect of using inexpensive cheese to make yourself a wonderful, full-bodied, sharp cheese that will keep for months and up to a year, well, here is one more skill to keep in your back pocket. And remember, it's no joke, everything's better with smoke.